Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom, co founder with Daniel Frankel of NexTMT. This is NexTMT Talks, sponsored this week by the Ventura TV operating system from the trade desk. And we are delighted to have a sponsor. I hope that the rest of corporate America follows suit with these very smart people. That being said, it's been a heck of a week. Ventura was at the Stream TV show along with I think over 100 other exhibitors and 17 or 1800 or 1900 attendees, and probably the best version of that show in its relatively short life ever. We were working our little fannies off doing video, show wrap ups, and all the rest, but we were also talking to a lot of really interesting folks. And I think that was kind of cool. So, Dan, I am sitting in the back bedroom of my parents on a computer creating content. This is pretty much how every million follower YouTube star has ever done it. And it turns out this is the way that we will be following things in the future. Who needs Hollywood?
You got
YouTube.
the backdrop of the Rockies,
Well, this is from the hotel, the Gaylord Rockies Resort. Sunset a couple of days ago. Pretty stunning, I got to tell you.
Oh, that's that you went that everybody was going to that
They were
bluff.
going on that berm to look at it. It's like, this is it. This is my shot. And you can see how gorgeous it could be. So it feels a little bit like a watercolor gone mad, but it also was beautiful. But it's interesting because the show itself, one of the recurring themes, and this is why I'm delighted to be in my father's back bedroom for the first time in quite a while, is that challenger, contributor, distributor, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't figure out how to make peace with that, you doomed, right?
It loomed large in the suburbs of Denver this week. A lot of the panel discussions they had Fetty Goldenberg, who I forget his title, but he spoke on half of YouTube, and there were panels uh, dedicated to, you know, we know it's a connected TV force. What do we do about it? And I got to say, Dave Bernath of Whirl kind of put it in perspective. He's like, first, everybody recovered from Amazon flooding the market with inventory, and now you've got the same kind of dynamic happening with YouTube. Uh, I saw something interesting on the way to the show. It was a consultant, Jeffrey Gilbert, who wrote that, calling it the same thing as other connected TV
As
entities.
Hulu or Disney Plus or
Right.
Netflix. It's like, no, that's a bad comparison, he said, right?
It's uncurated as opposed to curated. I don't know what difference that makes, but it puts it into a little different perspective. It's a different type of content, but
It is a different kind of content. I think that to me, it's an interesting distinction. I'm not sure it's a distinction with a difference in terms of the real thing that matters, which is where are the eyeballs? Are they watching YouTube and Netflix? Are they watching uh,
right.
HBO Max, as it soon will be renamed? Are they watching a video game? The Nielsen gauge. We did the Nielsen gauge, and we've got that in the newsletter. I strongly recommend take a look. We did it so it doesn't include YouTube. It's like everybody else. It's like, okay, well, that's the pie for the somewhat traditional, weird word to use with streaming, given how young it is.
That was Gilbert's take on it.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think about it?
I kind of side with you. Eyeballs are eyeballs. That's really what we're concerned about. What are people watching? And they're
Yeah.
watching YouTube. Any way you slice it, whatever you call it, whether you call it TV or not TV, the box that or panel that you hang on your wall, it has YouTube on it predominantly. So
Right. And to me, it's there's a bit of snobbery there. And far be it for me to say somebody else is being a snob, but TV's kind of been snobbed on for a long time. Movies, were better than TV, but TV was paying all the bills. Then all of a sudden streaming came along and starting to like eat their lunch. And now there's streaming, but it's like scripted is the best, and I guess we'll put up with this reality show stuff. But UGC, that's nothing, except for Mr. Beast has 250 million subscribers behind him. It's really wacky to watch the ladder of snobbery come down. So it just feels like it's got a little bit of that going on.
Well, you've got like a leading edge of millennial age consumers who grew up with YouTube and Gen Z as well. And they're now heads of households and they're determining things. And they don't think like we think. They don't watch what we watch. And
And
you
they
know,
don't distinguish, right? This is entertainment, man. This is what I watch.
this is content.
Yeah.
I remember hanging out with my friend and his son. We were at a cabin and prime time was just watching musician like do-it-yourself stuff on YouTube. That's how he got off with the TV. That's what primetime entertainment was to him. So who can
Absolutely.
argue with that? If you could sell advertising against it, it gets an audience. That is television. So
And if they're watching that, they're now watching something else. Laura Martin, the Needham and Company senior analyst and managing director, who tracks all of media and entertainment, was at the show. We had a video of her with the Stream TV live studios, and then she had a much awaited. This is the second year in a row she's done a much awaited, much anticipated.
Dave, some
What?
have called Laura Martin a bomb thrower.
Yes, including me, and I mean that in the best possible way
Yes.
imaginable. She'll throw a bomb, man. She likes stirring stuff up. And so she comes into a show like this. She's like, ooh, I got people liking this company. So, so one of the things I love Laura, she's fantastic. She's really fun.
She
And
seems
really
like you.
what?
She seems like you. She talks to you every time she comes
Yeah,
to.
yeah. I mean, we've been at dinners together and quasi-professional dinners in fabulous places with people like Mike Forehouse. I've had her on panels. So, but her point was, Wall Street doesn't care about anything going on at Stream TV unless your company is either doing something like YouTube, figuring out how you're going to negotiate, be part of YouTube and drive premium, which is like NFL programming creation there, or Amazon with all the e-commerce wrapped around that and the advertising with that. And if you don't have those, Wall Street doesn't care. And then the second question, though, and this is the other part of that, is like, okay, well, do you need to be huge to be successful? Do you need to have Wall Street care about you? And what do you think about that?
Um, I didn't see Laura's full confession. I had another video interview to conduct and missed Miss Martin's presentation, sadly.
But is it Amazon and or YouTube, or you're not going to be anything? Or is it, hey, there's room for little guys running around between the dinosaur's legs and for that matter, the woolly
They're
mammoth?
not publicly traded. I mean, they don't matter to her, right?
Right. That's the thing. But they will never get really publicly traded. It's like Trade Desk just went public last December, I think, for instance. Speaking of,
Right.
I think we got some video audio. We got some audio with Matthew Hennick, the SVP who presides over Ventura for the Trade Desk, which is the biggest of the independent online advertising marketplaces, and they're gigantic. So
Actually, an interesting discussion. I credit you. They've been a little coy. They debuted this big at a time when there's over a dozen TV OSs, and people were talking about how hard it is to design apps because there's so much fragmentation. They came out with another one, and their take is this is agnostic. It is, we don't have a dog in the hunt. We don't have a content platform like certain partners of ours. We won't say the name. But when they appear at venues like Stream TV, they kind of explain that early product position. They haven't really gone beyond that. But I thought there was a little more context provided in understanding in what they're doing through that conversation. So I'm looking forward to the audience hearing this.
yeah, so that'll be good. So we'll go to that now.
Hey everybody, it's David Bloom with NexTMT. I'm here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, and Matthew Hennick, the SVP of Ventura, the hip new operating system coming from the big independent advertising giant, the Trade Desk. Matthew, I think it's probably a good place to start. Is like, why another tvOS now? What are you guys bringing to the party?
Sure. As you mentioned, being part of the Trade Desk gives us a really unique perspective on how the money flows through the CTV ecosystem. And so when we looked at starting with the television manufacturers and retailers all the way to users, we saw some inefficiencies in terms of how the money moved from partner to partner, and that ultimately leads to a ton of conflict of interest commercially and a subpar user experience. So we went segment by segment. We started with the OEMs and the retailers of television. That is an incredibly tough business, right? Very low margin, sometimes a loss leader in certain cases. And so what we've seen over the past few years is in order to turn, the selling of a television, again, whether you made it or you just retail it, into more than a one-time revenue opportunity every 5.5, 6 years, everyone is moving into content and ads, which is our specialty. And so the way that you do that, if you're an OEM, you really have two choices that are both pretty difficult. Either one, you have to create your own OS in order to have leverage to build a content and an ads business. And we're seeing that obviously with Samsung and LG and others. Or you have to go out and find a third-party OS, three of which are, owned by the three of the most successful companies in the history of capitalism in Apple, Amazon, and Google. And you're basically being asked in exchange for possibly a bounty, but most likely just getting a free OS to mortgage your customer relationships and your business to them.
Go wrong.
Yeah, no. History is filled with a lot of examples of that just being great for the media industry.
Great for the media industry is falling apart. Yeah. So the timing is interesting here. I mean, first of all, I guess I am shocked to hear that there might be inefficiencies, possible corruption, other issues, double dealing, et cetera, in the advertising business. Mm-hmm. It has never been known for that ever before, right?
Always straight and on the straight and narrow.
Right on the straight and narrow. So how does Ventura remove some of those issues? How do you clean up this Wild West?
Right. So,
we're going to call you sheriff for that.
I'll earn the badge. But, there's two elements to it. There's the dollars flowing, as we were talking about, from OEMs to publishers to advertisers to users ultimately. But specifically, as CTV has finally admitted pervasively that advertising is an important monetization tool for it, we've seen our portion of our dollars that we're stewarding on behalf of our clients and agency partners to CTV. And so what we want to make sure is that we can bid on their behalf with confidence. And that requires knowing more data about who's watching and knowing more data about what show or what movie is being shown. And so, ad tech and real-time bidding is an incredibly complex system. The Trade Desk broadly across the internet, we look at over 17 million ad opportunities a second. And then we decide what percentage of those we want to bid on, which is a low single-digit percentage. And then we win a low single-digit percentage of that, based on what we're bidding on. We would be able to bid higher, which would benefit both our advertising clients and our publishers if there was more transparency to that supply chain.
You're reducing some of the friction in a system that has a lot of players, middlemen, right?
Yeah.
Part of the bid.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to have anyone to participate as long as they're providing value, and then the publisher can decide whether to take that bid and the advertiser can decide whether that was good for their business. But right now, the average CTV publisher could have, for one single ad unit, 140 different paths that go out into the world. We see many of them, and sometimes we can't even tell if they're the same one because of how obscure and opaque they are. And that's partly because there's a lot of players who are trying to take advantage of the fact that this is happening so fast, but also, publishers are being asked to pay taxes to their platforms, right? Both obviously on subscription and transaction, but also on the ad side too. And that can take the place of a revenue share where you're just, picking some pennies of every dollar over. Or in a lot of cases, the OSs are asking for inventory shares because they want to sell that inventory. And so the publishers very smartly and understandably are saying, yeah, you can have 10% of our inventory, but you can't say it's ours. Right? And you have to bundle it with 4 other CTV publishers, and you could call it premium CTV, and you can't tell them what percentage of the advertising buy landed there, because the publishers don't want to compete with the platforms to sell their own stuff. They also don't want to compete with the platforms that have their own content service. So there's just a lot of distrust there. Because we have our core business that has always been built on objectivity, we need to always look our advertising clients in the eye and say, we're putting your dollars in the best place for your business. We have no skin in the game beyond that. They're able to trust us to build a little bit more transparency in that ad ecosystem.
It's an alluring proposition, it's no doubt. But with this, tell me, the TVOS business is so competitive and fragmented. What gives you confidence that you can
Yeah, sure. Just like you've developed.
Well, it's again looking at each one of those segments, but in order, right? We live or die by distribution, right? And so when we look at OEMs, retailers, and satellite and cable operators, we're able to provide them, number one, a better commercial prospect. They're able to build ad businesses without handing over their customer relationships. If you're a retailer, you're not putting the world's largest, most aggressive e-commerce retailer in all of your customers' homes. And second, we built our tech stack to be very customizable, so that if you want to bring your brand to the UI, we're cool with that. If you want the Ventura name to be second or even non-existent, we're fine with that too. And so we want the OEMs, the retailers, and the operators to feel like this is a true extension of their business, which they're not really getting that option from many of the other players in market.
I think that one of the things that's interesting about your timing is that we're hearing, particularly you're here at the StreamTV Show, and a lot of the conversation has been, how much do you get in bed with YouTube, with your premium content? And also, if you are a brand, you need to think of yourself as a publisher, as the equivalent of a media company. You need to be there, and then you need to figure out how you keep your customers, how you keep your money as much as possible. So is that the opportunity that's the biggest in front of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of separate out where you should distribute your content broadly, right? And my background is mainly in content publishing, and I worked at Facebook as well. So I know that world, and I know the benefit of trying to build and grab an audience on those platforms, but we also know the pitfalls are you don't own them, you can't really contact them again. And so you should be everywhere, but you always need to have a place where you can really own that audience and own that relationship. And so when I even think about the difference between YouTube and Google TV, that's where that shows up. Most media companies should be publishing to YouTube, but they probably shouldn't be trusting Google TV to the extent that they maybe are in terms of maintaining that customer relationship for their advertisers and with their users. Google TV is probably the 200th most important product at Google. And so when YouTube comes into a meeting with them and asks them to change something for their benefit, they're going to do it. If you go to Google TV, if you power it on, probably half of the 6 carousel units are going to be ads for YouTube, Play Store, and YouTube TV. And then maybe they'll start promoting something from Disney or Paramount or somebody else.
One of the things I find interesting is your growing realization that data is everything. And how is Ventura's approach going to generate the data and help enable these guys to really take the chance? I think because that's the key. It's like you've got all this data, now what? Right?
Yeah, and which part is important, which part isn't. Data is everything, but it's also too much sometimes. The benefit we have there and the confidence to move in this direction is based on our core business. So we have this product UID2, which is an anonymized identity currency that is pervasive in CTV. Most of the big media companies use it, and
that's a step beyond the original UID, but really is everywhere for every bit of content, right?
Yeah, well, it's been really rewarding that every big media company in the US and mainly globally is like, we see the value of this. We see the value for privacy. We also see the value that we and other folks are able to bid with more confidence and at higher prices. So it actually shows that UID2 tag tokens are actually worth more in the advertising ecosystem. So when we work with publishers, we're asking them to bring that environment onto Ventura, and then to commitments around how their auctions work so that they're more transparent for everyone. We're not asking for the trade desk to be the sole demand source for what they're doing. We want them to bring every demand source that they could possibly want. We just all want to be competing with the same data and on a level playing field.
So I think that's good. All right. So what's the time frame to roll out this Ventura high web?
Yeah. The interesting thing, I think the moment that we're in, which is, even it's making the uncertainty in the OEM and retailer space even greater than it was even a few months ago, right? And so based on how we want to be partners with the OEMs to try and help stabilize and build a more sustainable business, I have to defer to them and when they think they're going to be able to make and stock televisions on shelves. So we're ready. As I mentioned, the software is flexible and can fit any type of timeline, any type of system on a chip, any type of memory envelope that we need. But I have to rely on them to tell you when they're going to be on shelves.
Good to know. And obviously, there are a few questions out there with international trade that complicate some things that are well beyond your control. But you guys are ready to go. So it's like, yeah, terrific. Well, I'm David Bloom with NexTMT and my partner, Daniel Frankel. We're here with Matthew Hennick, the SVP of Ventura, the new TV OS coming from the Trade Desk. It's its own thing within the bigger Trade Desk. It's its own corner of the desk, as it were.
Yeah, so we have our own little desk.
You have your own little desk, and it's a really nice desk, I'm guessing. It sounds like it's going to be a really interesting project. Good luck on this, and it's a pleasure talking with you.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
While we were away, there were some things happening. The biggest, least surprising, yet still really momentous announcement came from Warner Brothers Discovery, which said that, how we split and reorganized yourself into like studios and streaming on one side and all the doomed cable networks on the other, including the ones that used to be David Zaslav's own company, Discovery. All that's going to be on that streaming side. Well, today they said we're going to go ahead and cut the cord.
And put it all under the auspices of
the Grim Wiedzer.
The Grim Wiedzer.
Yeah. Gunnar Wiedenfels, who knows how to cut. This guy has whacked out 20 billion plus in debt in just 3 years. The man knows how to wield a scalpel, a chainsaw, and a bazooka. So it's going to be great times for those cable networks.
Given the level of debt that you described in our column this week, it's going to be required of him.
Yeah, they're gonna take most of the debt, but they also are taking most of the cash flow for now. So that'll be interesting. And it's kind of interesting. They're taking 20% of the streaming and studios section, which they have to sell in the first year after the split, because otherwise there's some tax implications. And John Malone, the power behind the throne of all of this, is always about the least tax payment possible. That drives him in everything.
So they're splitting, but 20% of them isn't splitting. Okay.
Well, 20%. So shares equal to 20% of the new streaming and the SNS, streaming and studios. SNS goes with the global linear networks, the GLN. Right. And so, but they have to sell it into the market. And that gets really complicated because if you sell it too fast, it depresses the price on the other stuff. If somebody wants to go and buy the streaming and studios with all that wonderful IP that Warner Brothers has had over these last 100 years, 101 now.
Yeah.
If you want to buy that, and they're putting stuff in the market, if you buy the 20%, right, you go and swoop in and buy the 20%. Well, everything else gets more expensive because if somebody's going, oh, there's somebody buying. So the remaining 80% goes whoop, and it gets a lot more expensive to do a deal. So it seems like it adds a lot of complexity to whatever, David Zaslav, who will stay, micro movie mogul at SNS, whatever they end up doing, wherever they end up going.
So as the receptacle to Laura Barton's wisdom, explain
that sounds vaguely inappropriate, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
The recipient.
That's a much
some of her vision.
Elegant way of her vision.
Tossing bomb mode.
What is the strategy here? NBCU did this with their linear networks. They separated them from the broader Comcast. And I always took that, that gets those declining networks off their books.
Right.
And does Warner Brothers see, streaming is the future, and soon there'll be an Albatross 2, and we'll set ourselves up for kind of a new future where HBO Max is the leading edge, or what define it for me?
Well, there's a couple of things. So first of all, I'd go back to our friends of the show over at Moffett Nathanson, who said last fall, November, December somewhere in there. Hey, the modern media company has film production, TV production, streaming, maybe a broadcast network, because that still provides reach and cash. Even as it's declining, the four broadcast networks are still valuable. And we think that they should probably merge with Fox, because that balances out. They've got a powerhouse streaming service in whatever we're calling it this day, HBO Max HBO, whatever. And Fox has Tubi, so it's got a huge, successful fast operation, and sports and a broadcast network. So that would be like a marriage made in heaven, other than the politics are complicated and separate. But dump most of the debt, right? Refinance some of that debt, but dump most of the remaining $34 billion in debt sitting, so that you just go off with your happy, functional operations that are pointed toward the future, and you take an ice floe with the grim Wiedzer on it, and you push it out to sea with some assets that might be attractive to people, and you say, bye, Grandma. So that's the strategy.
All disruption and change stems from John Malone's decisions.
Well, that's a lot of it, man. He's been driving this stuff for 35, 40 years now. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting, though, is what does the role of CNN have in all of this? You, in particular, have written very compellingly, I must say, about our favorite boy at the FCC, one of two that are left, good old Brendan Carr.
Yes,
who's easily offended by DEI things and has magically found reasons to dive into all kinds of investigations, but obviously has put the Paramount sale in peril. Is the involvement of CNN, which Trump doesn't like, but maybe doesn't care about as much because it matters less. Will that get in the way? Will they have to just like toss CNN over the gunnels to get it out there and then move forward? I mean, I'm going to be curious to see if that leads to another shakedown.
I don't know. Like you said, I haven't heard the president, if I can call him that, mention CNN too much.
Our only president.
It's not under the auspices of Jeff Zucker anymore. It's been largely neutered. It was, in terms of propaganda networks, it had kind of, on the left, turned into that during the 2020 campaign. Let's face it.
Explicitly so, yeah, under Zucker. Yeah, that was his whole strategy.
Yeah, he wanted to kind of have some redemption for creating what he thought was the monster with The Apprentice. So he did that. And
still didn't slay the dragon, but I'm sure he felt better.
It's got declining ratings. I can see the president using the opportunity to remind everybody of that, but I don't think it's a force in the zeitgeist, at least politically right now. I don't see it as a problem right now for Zaslav.
That being said, any sale, and I mean any sale, whether it's within global linear networks or tossed over the side like some chum for the Sharks, is problem for the people who work at CNN, which has been, to my mind, one of the great news organizations of the last half century. I think they're 42 years old now, or 45, somewhere in there. They've been one of the great news organizations globally with a great brand. They've shot themselves in the foot a lot, and they really hadn't. I mean, it's inexcusable that they didn't do more of what Mark Thompson, their now CEO, has been trying to do in terms of building a real online presence and stuff. But they're there. They spent $70 million. He told them last winter, and they're going to be.
2 years ago that there's a opportunity for them to create kind of a New York Times model.
Right, which he was the architect of the first time. He's the guy he was at the New York Times doing all that, and was at the BBC before that. So he knows how to do this stuff, but they weren't getting there very fast. And there's a bunch of people like Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper making really nice money that's really not going to pencil out with the business structures that are to come.
Yeah, I could see those jobs being in jeopardy for a number of reasons. And it would be somewhat ironic if CNN was a political hangnail, given what David Zaslav told investors. I think it was the day after the election in
Right.
November. They were doing
Yeah.
third quarter earnings. He said, "Well, there's an opportunity to do some M&A that didn't exist under the previous administration." It's like, yeah, give me a break.
Yeah, it's funny though. I'm going to just for now from now on, the show will refer to CNN as political hangnail. CNN.
Yeah,
Thump.
it's the
Thump. Anyway, this is the time of year where we shamelessly go for your consideration ads, like everybody at Penske, and say, "Hey, it looks like voting started for the Emmys,
I was
and
surprised you were
please, let's do a
interested in
special
that.
section worth billions of dollars or something."
Yeah.
But like, what do you think is going to what's going to get Emmy? Because this is the first round to figure out who the nominees are. So this is where it gets really interesting in terms of, you still got a shot, right? So all the ads and things are going on, the campaigns, the receptions, the screenings, all that stuff. Who would you love to see get some Emmy love that's not been just, oh, them again?
Haven't I urinated on award shows enough to make it clear that I have just utter dissonance for the process now? But what do I think has been really good television this year?
Yeah.
The Affair, David.
Well, nothing like being cutting edge, buddy.
I do it because
the
Vivian
winner
is good to the
of
Affair.
2019 Emmys there. Like we come to dance to look forward.
That's a really good question. There hasn't been, I mean, as I've said in this space before, I really like The Pit. I saw something with Vivian on Saturday night that isn't eligible by 5 days because it debuted on June 4th on Apple TV Plus. Stick with Owen Wilson. And
Yeah.
this is Owen Wilson's self, but I thought the storyline, the plot, Mark Moran. Anyway, I like Stick. It's Owen Wilson being himself, being Owen Wilson, but it's got very well written, good sticky sports drama comedy plot line. Best thing I've seen in a while. But in terms of what has rocked my world, it's been kind of disappointing year. I thought The Last of Us, which I enjoyed so much on Max last year, I thought season 2 was a disappointment. The Tyler Sheridan stuff, like everyone else, I've watched it, but I kind of feel like it's a little soapy. It contains a lot of kind of right-wing propaganda, and I think that it's created sort of a Paramount formula. What was it?
It is, but the Taylor Sheridan thing matters in terms of the political stuff in this moment, because I'm betting that the preponderance of voters in the TV Academy are probably less aligned with where Taylor's coming from, particularly the oil companies just like you and me. I loved Landman. I really did. I mean, it's soap, and oil in a place that I know well. But I mean, how does that play with Emmy voters as opposed to just flyover land loves Taylor Sheridan?
I don't know if you watch. I mean, all of it's pretty compelling television. I don't want to. I mean, I watch all of it. And in 1923, for example, with Helen Mirren and Harrison Ford, and you've got this plot line: the young lovers. She's coming from England by train to meet Spencer, and and she. Well, if you haven't seen it, turn this off and come back later.
Spoiler alert for somebody finally catching up to the show that's been
anyway,
out.
She ends up in making the wrong choice and getting stuck in the frozen tundra on the way to Montana and catching severe frostbite and dying, but not before the birth of her child, Spencer's only son, and continuing the Dutton family bloodline. It was a little bit much. It's so dramatic. It's not HBO or AMC or that kind of TV. If they
But it is TV. It's just not HBO. You mentioned you loved Mobland. I got a few that I think are going to be obvious. So Hacks is going to be back at it. Severance is going to just pile up the nominations, I think, because it is all talk about the cultural zeitgeist that is there. Particularly, I am told, with younger audiences. Adolescence on Netflix.
Adolescence. That's the one I should have said.
Yeah, that's That one's pretty harrowing. I'm hoping White Lotus did not have as good a season this year as the first 2 years. And I'm hoping the Academy restrains itself and doesn't say everybody who showed up for a 5-minute cameo gets to be nominated. They kind of branch out a bit to like the rest
I
of
will say
television.
this on Father's Day, and happy Father's Day, David.
Yeah.
As a dad, I'm thankful that I've never had my son call me, "Oh, hey, Dad, I may have stabbed to death a classmate. I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet.
Upside. That's an upside. As I sit here waiting for my daughter to make a lovely dinner for me and my father, her grandfather.
Yeah.
Yes. No stabbing involved except of defenseless dead chicken for dinner. I hope Andor, which got a little bit of notice for everything but the actors in the first season. Disney Plus has apparently spent a prodigious $650 million on these 2 seasons, and they did a good job. This is not just a little side quest for Star Wars. This is a serious, meditation on terrorism and fighting an implacable authoritarian force and all this stuff.
Battlestar Galactica of the fascist age, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and a bunch of little roles that are beautifully done by crackerjack actors, and it's science fiction, and we know the snobby. Speaking of snobbery, the snob ladder also includes science fiction down the line, but Severance will probably get some love. And I'll be interested. Here's one I liked a lot, and it was a big hit. Shonda Rhimes, her TV factory at Netflix came out with The Residents, with Uzo Aduba as a just hilarious, crackerjack investigator trying to figure out a murder in the White House residence. And it is surprisingly, routinely funny and wacky at the same time. It's got this little murder mystery. It's so much more interesting to me than Only Murders in the Building, which is the one that gets a lot of Emmy nominations every year. So I'm hoping they get a little attention. Department Q on Netflix, I'm finding really interesting. Matthew Good, the tortured lead actor, is great, but so are some of the other characters, and it's a really interesting kind of cross between British murder mystery and Nordic noir. That's cool. Zero Day, I kind of like.
If we keep going, Pinsky Bay Bias, will be another part of the entertainment showbiz trade empire.
We're not getting a nickel out of those bastards, but we'll talk about this stuff.
I'm just ragging on you, David.
But we're about, television is a big part of what we do, so we should talk about the best of it. The Emmys hope to capture that in their 458,000 different awards that they hand out between the prime times, the daytimes, the special awards, the random dude walking by, hey, let's give you one, the local Emmys for news and stuff.
Speaking of television, I did catch you in a moment of that's a peak, do they call it? A moment of consternation on Friday morning. You were, after churning out 50 video interviews at the StreamTV Show, you're at your desk and you're reading the computer, a press release.
I look like Marco Rubio.
You were just beside yourself. The Television Critics Association, what was their announcement?
Oh, well, they just said, hey, we got a new board. We elected a new board of directors, and great. God bless them. New board. The fact that there's even a Television Critics Association left, given the battering that the TV critics business has taken.
Right. It's transformed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been transformed. Like there's the New York Times still has a weekly watching column, a newsletter they send out, and they will write about stuff. But the board members were from organizations that are mostly like, I've never heard of that. And that's not a knock on them. It's just where we all are. And, NexTMT, like snarking about those guys is probably Kettle saying hi to the pot and calling it black. But it was just interesting because it's sort of a measure of the decline of the TV critic business in some ways at a time when there's more great TV to talk about than ever.
I think I've identified myself as being sort of left of center in this forum.
I think it's safe to say that.
I think
you're not going out on a limb right now.
I last attended regularly TCA summer and winter critics tours when I worked for the lovely Sharon Waxman at the Wrap. And I would go there and you'd have like folks from like basement level websites that, there was no kind of gilding process to screen them. They were there with a still robust collection of critics from major newspapers, magazines.
Places you'd heard of, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
And the discussion
Experience,
about,
trained. They went to film school. They had some sense of history. They weren't just fanboys, fanning themselves with ardor. Right?
I found the discussion so fanboyish of the questions to these interesting panels of creators and talent, that, being from kind of a trade business atmosphere, there was nothing there for me. And then when they would get into something more provocative, it was the discussion about representation in television, which is I don't want to denigrate that topic. It is important. When it doesn't reflect who we are, it does alienate a lot of people. And, we already know this, but the way it was broached, like, well, how many faces of color do you have in your show? Very commodity driven and almost impossible.
Kind of a head count. It's a head count approach to stuff, right?
It put the executives on the defensive, and after a while, you had like sort of this bunker mentality, and it just felt like the wrong kind of dialogue for it. And I think, I look at some of the things that are, about good progressive movements that don't resonate well in the broader public, and I think of that kind of shrill dialogue that would happen at those events. It sure turned me off. I didn't think there was anything there for us, which was interesting.
Right.
Wasn't interesting.
Well, we are seeing, that sort of performative head counting stuff has, I think, led to some improvements, at least in the range of programming that's out there. And I think that's great. I look forward to seeing more of that. There's a lot of shows I've really enjoyed from like indigenous people north of North. That's one out of an indigenous production company in Canada with some support from the Canadian government. That's a bright, fresh, fun little comedy that also, I hope, gets some notice. I will see what happens to that. That's, and before that, it was a Reservation Dogs, set on a res in Oklahoma, and it was really smart from Taika Waititi and was Sterling Harjo, I think. And great stuff.
Will honor content shot for very pricey Apple VR rigs.
Oh yeah, like I debated getting on here with my Apple Vision Pro, which I brought with me.
The Apple Vision Pro, I learned from you, who covered from afar the Worldwide Developers Conference, the WWDC, to the uninitiated, Apple's big techie event this year.
At their annual event where they display all the cool things, the software changes they're making, basically.
That device is still very much a thing.
Yeah. Well, and I was fascinated by it because it's considered by many critics to be one of a rare Apple flop. It sold probably less than 1 million headsets at $34.99 a piece just to start. It is extraordinary technology, and now they're adding more things. So, like, I talked to the creative director behind their first feature-length movie, which is an adaptation of Bono's stage show, the U2 singer Bono's stage show based on his memoir. And that's, I joke that, and he actually opens his show, to his credit. I mean, Bono says,
it's Bono. I always call him Bono.
You say it your way, I'll say it my way.
Well,
Bono Vox. He's Italian Irish. Yeah, he made the name up. He says, you say whatever you want.
Okay, whatever.
So, he says when he opens the show, he says, it's a real act of sort of self-absorption to write a memoir, and then to do a stage show based on the memoir is really self-absorption. But now to do a movie of the stage show of the memoir, and then do an immersive version of the movie of the stage show of the book, might suggest a certain level of navel gazing most of us can never hope to achieve. But that being said, it's a really interesting project, and I look forward to see how other stuff like this comes out, not rock star memoirs, but new kinds of content that break the four walls, that are more than you could have if you were in a physical space like the Beacon Theater where that was shot, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really interesting stuff. But
You've
they're
always
making
thought of
content.
transformative technology.
Yeah. And the other thing is that's really important is they got up at WWDC and said, we're changing all our user interface designs to unify them more across iPhones and Macs and iPads and Apple TV to look more like we've been inspired by the work we've done on the Apple Vision Pro. So that's where they're going. And I think they're not the only ones heading there. Certainly Meta's spending a lot of money. Snap's doing some stuff that's really interesting. This is where we're going. So you got to pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah, there's just no financing model that makes it in reach of the youth consumer.
Well, that is not going to be the final price for the end of time for these things. Apple basically got this on the market. They're going to start building and like, for instance, by putting this out there, Blackmagic Design, the mad genius that runs Blackmagic Design, Garth Petty, who I interviewed at NAB a couple of months ago, they're going to have a new googly-eyed $35,000 camera designed to shoot immersive stuff for the AVP. And they've already tweaked their DaVinci Resolve software. It's kind of do everything, editing, audio, broadcast graphics, color correction in particular, software to be able to do spatial computing experience editing. So we're creating now, and that's what Apple is doing by putting that thing out there.
What
even if it didn't
Telly sold a version of the Vision Pro with their ad-supported model. Huh?
Who did?
Telly
Telly.
uses an ad-supported model to sell smart TVs that you don't have to pay for the TV. You just have to watch
Yeah. Well, I did a video with the Telly CEO, and he was great. Or maybe it was the CRO. I think it might have been the CRO. I strung him in, tracked that down on the StreamTV Show YouTube site. Really interesting. Of course, it's a premium TV with all the bells and whistles, and it's got a separate little screen that's like 10 inches high by 48 or whatever that runs lots of widgets of like sports scores and news and all that, but always on.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
got a lot
your
of privacy and a lot of
Faustian
attention. And and it always occurred, the thing to me is always been, why would you, and I'm not like a college age consumer where $100 means a ton more than it does later in life when you're more established. But I always thought, well, smart TVs aren't so inaccessible. $3,500 VR rigs, that's kind of something that seems like it would lend itself quite well to this model.
It's an interesting thing to think about, but it's also antithetical to what Apple has done with Apple TV Plus. The only service, I think now, the only major service that doesn't have ads, because they don't need it. There's a $3 trillion company. They spend about $8 billion on programming for Apple TV Plus, and that's couch change that Tim Cook found. He was redecorating, and they shook down the couches in his office. And look, there's $8 billion. Let's make a TV show. Kind of like that. But you're right. But they're all about premium. So I don't know if they would ever do that. It is interesting to think about. They have absolutely made something that's designed to create the infrastructure for high-end, high-quality, immersive experiences of the production tools like the Blackmagic Ursa Cinema immersive camera and the software to edit it, and filmmakers like Charlotte Mecklenburg, who does they're gut-churning, amazing videos of like these elite athletes doing stuff like walking on a high line 1,000 feet above a fjord in Norway. Please don't throw up because you're wrapped around it with her walking across that high line.
I just love the innovative way a couple of summers ago, my youngest son, there's a dynamic in the family that if you need anything, tie it to baseball. And then all of a sudden the budgetary doors wide open for you. Something that my wife loves. Anyway, he wanted the Meta VR. He said, they have a hitting instructional program there. It was kind of cool. This will definitely improve my average. Anyway, I think the kid did everything but practice swinging the bat with the rig.
Well, who does that? I mean, like practice. Let's do play. But that being said, I just think that all this stuff is interesting now, and what it sets up for 3 years from now. First of all the Apple devices are going to look a lot more like the Apple Vision Pro. Anyway,
So, well,
we're going to wrap
this
this up. It's Father's Day. We're going to wrap this thing up. Thank you, Dan. Happy Father's Day to you. Happy Father's Day to me and all the fathers out there. I hope you're doing your best to help your kids succeed and wear the Apple Vision Pro or a Meta Quest so they can learn what entertainment looks like 5 years from now. Thanks to Ventura, the TV operating system from the trade who sponsored us. This is like a step forward, and we're very proud of that, unduly so, perhaps. And thanks to all our thousands of subscribers who are giving us encouragement to keep going.